Man, when you're a radio person, you just continue to be, it never leaves you. It never leaves you.
What he said is absolutely true.
I'm still trying to figure out which pot you're in. Let's see,
Oh,
five or
well,
six.
I don't know. I'm not the one that works. How's that? I'll talk for a second. Let me describe John Kroll, if I might. He's a little grayer than he was when I first met the guy
There we go. That's
at
six.
WNAW. He was a young guy by at the time. I like radio. I like news. I like to do this. And I said, okay, fine. And then we had the Berkshire News Network, and the rest, as they say, is history. And of course, I tapped you on the shoulder for Good Morning Pittsfield, and you handled that superbly for what, 10 years?
Oh my gosh.
Something like that.
I appreciate that. I remember we were in that studio at Taconic High School and we just decided to go live on the air. I don't know if anyone was listening, but we were just testing things out. Kind of like, right now actually, we're just kind of freewheeling it. And I remember asking, what should we call the show? Actually, you came up with the name.
Well, I mean, it was obvious. Good Morning Pittsfield, you know.
you know.
Good Morning America, Good Morning Pittsfield. There's a bunch of good mornings all over the United States.
Yeah.
So I said Good Morning Pittsfield, and it stuck like spaghetti on a wall.
There
So
you go.
it
There you go.
worked.
And it became quite a thing. Yeah, I look at a station, and you were talking off air about a group of people, or a couple of guys that they work in commercial radio, and they like to sort of dabble in public radio because it's that creativity where you can have a lot of fun. And I think that's what we all want to do. Commercial radio is what it is. Public radio is what it is, but community radio,
See,
that was,
that's the thing right there. Community radio. Now, years ago when I first got here, 1,000 years ago, actually I came here in 1985.
mm,
Okay, to WBEC. Now, back then in the 80s, 70s, 60s, the local stations, WBEC, WBRK, they were real hot local AM stations.
mm,
And they were like today's community stations. They did everything. They did sports, they did politics, they did school stuff. You name it, they did it because they were for the community. And then things started to change. Now, today's community stations like WTBR, there's one in Bennington, Vermont, WBTN, AM 1370. They tend to be more community oriented. They're not commercial.
mm,
So they have to get the money somehow. So they have, underwriters and sponsors who come aboard. But they do it a little bit differently because it's not like they're not going to hire a pro. They can't afford it. So they take volunteers. And it's a lot of times it's people from the community who would like to do radio. Now, WTBR is a real good example of that.
mm.
They're not associated with Taconic High School anymore, but they have people coming in from the community who have ideas for shows. Somebody wants to do a polka show, which has been on for 1,000 years. Somebody wants to do a Spanish show, or they want to do jazz, or they want to do something else, or the Beatles. And they come up and they propose the idea. And if it works out, you're on your own.
Yeah.
But these are not trained professionals.
Yeah.
These are the guys that work at the grocery store, or they work over at somewhere else, or they don't work and they just come in and they do it because they like doing it.
Hmm.
So that's one aspect of community radio. And running WTBR, I got a good dose of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was quite the time. And that station was going to be sold off. That signal, it was going to be sold off to like a Christian station or something like that. And but ultimately, because the FCC needed some local programming, that's where we came in. And then there were more shows that were created. But I think the biggest thing that you did during the time was get the students involved. And probably there was no time where the students were more involved than at that point then, but there were times before that, the Bob Cooper era and so forth, and they but you had it kind of back to that early prominence.
Well, for a long time, the students were not on the station, and anybody who was, they were didn't know what to do. There was no supervision. So when I came in, the station was basically off the air.
Yeah, it's dead air.
It was kaput. It was, you know, and I went in. The first thing I had to do was try to figure out what's going on here.
Hmm.
Well, the control board was shot, uh, just misuse. I remember Carl Flossick from the Polka Show.
Yeah.
He gave me a call one day at BEC and he goes, "Need your help up here at the school." I said, "What's the matter?" Now, I wasn't involved with TBR at the time. And he said, "I need your help up here." Um, the microphone fell off the mic boom. It just fell down. He said, "I have to hold it up to talk." I said, "Okay." So I said, "Can you come up this evening? We're doing a show." And it was on, I believe, a Friday night. He said, "If you come up, maybe you can fix it." Yeah, okay. So where are you in the high school? It's easy to find. You come in the front door, you go here, you go there. It took me a half hour to find the place. I mean,
There's literally no directions there.
It was in back of another classroom. It was in back of.
I used to send the directions via email to people who had never been there before, and they still would have a difficult time finding it. Usually what would happen was they would be escorted there by someone from the main office. And that was really how it worked because there was no signage. There was no real directional from, you enter into the main entrance and it doesn't say, "Oh, WTBR this way."
Yeah, I put signs up eventually.
Eventually,
So Carl had to come down and find me. And I was roaming around a corridor of the school. He said, "You're not even close." So he brought me to the station. And even after that, I had a couple times I went there. Where the heck is this place? So I went in and the mic was broke. The little mic holder just snapped.
Yeah.
And so I found a piece of, the kind of stuff holds the bags together, little bread ties.
Yeah.
I found a couple of those in a rack, in a cabinet, and I tied them together and tied the mic up. And he was on his way.
I do recall a couple times where I had to actually hold them. I guess how uncomfortable it is to stand for about 45 minutes during an interview and have to hold that mic up there. So yeah, it definitely was a lot of things were on a shoestring over there. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
It was, and when I took over, WUPE had been sold to Vox, I think it was. And I asked the folks at Vox, I said, "I'm getting involved in kind of rebuilding this high school radio station." And they asked me about it, and I told them, no problem. "What do you need?" I said, "Well, I could use quite a few things." They said, "Make a list." So I did. I mean, from the control board on down. I mean, microphones. I put all kinds of stuff down. I gave him the list and he looked at it and he goes, "Yeah, okay, fine. Take what you need." The board? He goes, "Sure, yeah, it's no good to us. We've got new stuff." And this stuff was 20 years old already. So,
and I love that board.
Yeah, it's still in use.
They're still using it today. So apparently they don't make them like they used to, or maybe they do, but they sure last a long time. And I know they had to do a few fixes, replace some of those little lights in there, but overall the board works.
Yeah,
it still works today.
And we had a friend of mine, an engineer, Tom Harrison, and this guy forgot more about electronics than I'll ever know. And he came in and he opened that board up like it looked like a baby hippo when it's open. And he made that thing sing. He cleaned it up. He used electronic cleaner. He got the thing to work. We had some spare bulbs that came with the board, and we put them in. Of course, they would blow out every couple 3 months.
Sure.
Dumb stuff. But it worked, and he turned that board around. Even when Pittsfield Community Television took over TBR, he was still involved. In fact, he was there when they took the board from the high school over to Pittsfield Community Television. And he was involved with them for a year or so, getting things straight and the computers straight and everything.
Well, he had to. I mean, he was the one who really made it, the automation happen. And so that was something that really saved the day because listen, when you don't have any paid people, it's all volunteers. You got to have some automation there going on, and he was able to bring that to the table. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, he was. I consider him a genius in the stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, he doesn't work in radio or electronics. And the reason he does not work in electronics or radio, he doesn't want anybody to tell him what to do. When he's doing his electronic stuff or computer stuff, this guy's a whiz. He's also a ham radio operator. And the last time I went out to his house, and he lives out in on the other side of the state,
Taunton, I think, or somewhere out there.
somewhere. But he was showing me, his ham rig and how he got it set up and everything. And I was looking at it, going, I might try this at home. And I got home and I mentioned to my wife, I was over at Tom's place and he has this, and she said, "You're not buying anything. We're retired." So that took care of that. But he was a fantastic guy. Actually, I was surrounded by a bunch of really talented people. Um, there was Brad Lorenz, who was in on it, and Joe Midland.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, Joe does all the liners for my show now.
Yeah.
He has since the inception of the show. But I had people who went in and did incredible work. You are one of those, because when you went in and started Good Morning Pittsfield, people were asking, "What's that all about?" And it worked out beautifully. It really, because when you went into WTBR, started doing Good Morning Pittsfield, talk radio on the AM stations, BRK and BEC, was going out.
Yes.
I was still doing a talk show on BEC. I think there was one on BRK, but they were shrinking in size and not exactly what you were doing. You were bringing it to everybody. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I turned the radio on and the mayor's on, or I turned the radio on and somebody else is on. You had a list.
Yeah. We really did. It didn't, and it was really amazing to have it in that humble little studio, to be able to have governors, bank presidents, people who were, really well-known actors, things like that, which I think was amazingly helpful for the station, because, it ultimately, the exposure that you get from the actual broadcast is one thing, but literally the foot traffic of people coming in, and in the first couple of years, for sure, people were asking, "So where is this? What is this? What station?" So there was this, learning curve for a lot of people who had influence in the community over time. So I think that was one of the greatest things, I think, was to be able to bring exposure by literally having people walk that hallway, find their way to the station, and be like, "Wow, this is really, really cool." And I think that energy, I think, helped propel the station.
Now, who was the most interesting couple of people you had on Good Morning Pittsfield?
Yeah, I think, well, it was great to have Deval Patrick come in to the studio. That was really cool, because I had been working on it. That's when he was governor. He was in his probably last few months as governor.
But still, who ever heard of a governor going to a high school radio station?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, the guy was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he would be on WBUR all the time and so forth. So that was really cool. I'll tell you, the most, you interview a lot of people, and you get a sense and you get a feel and you understand. I'll tell you, the person who was most on, and that did not skip a beat, because you can see people thinking, when you're speaking to them, you can see when they're grasping for a thought or what have you. The one who was the sharpest I had ever seen, and he's still around here, is Evan Dobell, the former mayor of Pittsfield. And when he was on and he's speaking, like, that guy was like, boom, right on. That he did not miss a beat. And so, you can chalk that up to, wow, he's a great politician, or you can chalk that up to a really sharp mind. But I'll never forget that, because when he came in and sat down, it was like, boom, right there. So, and you get And so that's there's something about a conversation that's at a coffee house, and that is one thing. But when you're on air, there's a certain sense of urgency to it when you have those conversations. And, some of it is okay, well, everything I'm saying can be heard by the world. Okay, so there's that little bit of sense of urgency there, but there's something magical about the intimacy of a radio conversation.
It is, and I mean on WBEC AM, I also did a talk show called Up Front.
Mhm.
Now, most of the time it was local people, but once in a while, if there was somebody coming into town for a show, or I'd have them on the show, or I'd at least I'd ask their managers or whatever if they could come on. And I had a conga line of people that came in. I'd have to go back and actually write them down. Vicki Lawrence comes to mind right now.
Mhm.
Uh, Mom on Mom's World or whatever that's called. She came in.
Mhm.
Um, You Light Up My Life girl, Debbie Boone, was at she was somewhere. But I don't know what venue she was working at, but I asked if she would come in, and she did.
Mhm.
It was incredible. Debbie Boone walks into the now, figure. I would tell the front desk of the station, Debbie Boone is coming today. The girl who sang "You Light Up My Life." Yep, that one. Well, she came in, and everybody to a person said, "I didn't think she was that short." She was maybe 5'2",
Mm.
and she's in the studio. I had to lower the mic, and we had a wonderful conversation. Vicki Lawrence, on the other hand, did you ever talk with somebody who seemed like they just didn't want to be there? She don't get me wrong, she was very nice, and off the air, she was very pleasant to talk with. Um, but I got the feeling when I was talking to her on the air, she just didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
What am I doing here in a little AM station? Come on.
Yeah.
I want to be at a big station in New York City. But
Yeah.
and
It's
there were so many people. You mentioned Governor Deval Patrick.
mm.
Now, Deval Patrick, uh, if I called the governor's office, if I had a question for the governor, how and you were in this situation.
Yeah.
You called it. We'd like to find out what day is the ship coming in, and the governor's people would say, "Well, we'll get back in touch with you." And I'm not kidding. He would always call back in person.
Mm.
He very rarely would a spokesman call for the governor's office. He would call the poor receptionist. Yeah, Larry, Governor Patrick's on the phone for you on line 2. Oh, thank you. And I'd pick it up. Hello. He said, I'm returning your call. And he would answer I said, let me start recording. Sure, take your time. And he would answer the question.
I remember, and maybe you were here or there, when Paul Cellucci was the governor.
Oh my God.
He brought
I'm going to tell you a story about Paul Cellucci.
he brought everyone to the Highland.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm going to talk about.
and we were all there, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I can't remember if I was with NAW or WAMC at the time, but I was amazed that was happening.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. It never happened before, and to me never happened again, because I think the governor after him was Mitt Romney, and
Romney didn't do anything.
Romney didn't do anything.
No.
And so it was very difficult. I mean, there was no personality. It was really amazing what a contrast that was, because the one time I got a chance to interview Mitt Romney, it was so staged. He came out, all the reporters were there, and he literally answered 2 or 3 questions, and then everyone was kind of whisked away, and he was whisked away.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thing where Paul Cellucci, hey, sit down. He's got tomato sauce all over, he's crumbs.
I remember when
the Highland.
The governor's office called the radio station and said, we would like you to, hopefully you can be at the Highland Restaurant in Pittsfield. Governor Cellucci is going to have a press conference there at, I think it was like maybe 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, something like that. And I said, sure, put me down. Okay. Well, it comes time just before, and the people said, come hungry. Huh? Wait a minute. I know it's the Highland and it's a good restaurant, but okay. So I went. The first one I went to, I could not believe what was going on. The governor was sitting at a very long table right in the middle, and we were all seated on the same table. It reminded me of um, the picture of the Last Supper, except
Yeah.
there's more people, and people with microphones and cameras and everything else. Governor Cellucci sat there, and he had a bowl. He said he ordered good old fashioned pasta
Mm.
and a couple meatballs. Oh, they filled him. He was the only person, John, that I ever interviewed who could talk and understandably with his mouth full. He would sit there and answer a question. Here's a reporter from, say, WAMC, and they said, how much money are you going to spend on roads this year? And he'd take a big bite of meatballs or something. But and all I could think of was my mother saying, "Don't talk with your mouth full.
Yeah.
Chew with your mouth closed." And he got through the whole thing, and we could eat.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was the most
And
incredible thing.
I had my stint in public service. He is the only one who I look at and say, wow, I want to be like that guy. And I like Duvall. I mean, I think we all liked him. He had a special relationship with the Berkshires and everything. But Paul Cellucci came from, I think he was a Board of Selectmen member, was his first elected, so he wasn't some, he wasn't some highfalutin person. He was genuinely that kind of individual. And so anyone who's comfortable enough to be eating with your mouth full and answering questions with cameras and microphones and the whole shebang. Yeah.
He'll wipe his mouth every now and then and John, you haven't asked the question. The poor guy has to come up with a question real quick. He said, "There's no stupid questions here, gang. So ask anything you want. Just enjoy your meal."
Yeah.
And he would pay for it.
Yeah.
And he goes, "By the way, this is not coming out of government money. This is my wallet." He said, "It's my charge card."
Yeah.
Now the Deval Patrick was amazing when he first made his announcement statewide that he was running for office.
Yeah.
He did it in Pittsfield.
Yeah, I was there.
Now, you remember it was on the site of what is now the Greylock Bank. It was a hill with the wind blowing.
The PETA site. The PETA site.
And he was
cold.
Cold.
It was miserable.
And I didn't know what the guy was like. So I parked the car and I go out and and here's a bunch of people standing around. I figure, well, they had suits on. They got to be important. So I go up to him and I said, "I'd like to know which one is Deval Patrick." And he comes right over and he says, "I'm Deval Patrick. I'm your next governor if you live in Massachusetts." I said, "You are my governor because I live here." And I introduced myself and then he made the announcement and so on. A few years later, into his tour duty here, he was at can't remember. It's a big manufacturing place on 102 or out that way. And he was
in Lee, yeah.
Well, he was there, and he was reporters everywhere, cameras, radio people, and they're all over the newspaper people. And I had a question for him, and I kept raising my hand, and he came close, and he didn't answer my question. So finally, he said, "That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much." Now, all the reporters they're all backing off, but I was the real pain in the butt. And I said, "Governor, can I talk to you for a second?" And he turns around. Now, John, I figure this out. Okay. How many times have I talked to that guy? He knew who I was. He turns around and he had, how the politicians leave the room, they have 3-4 people around them. Okay.
Yeah.
He's leaving the room like that. And he turns around and says, "Larry, come over here." Okay, that was my first story, but I tried not to be like, "Oh, wow, he knows me." So we went into a private little alcove, and I asked him my questions, which I don't know, but I asked him the questions, and he asked me, and he answered, and then he said, "And thank you for asking that question." He said, "I really appreciate it." Shook my hand and went away. Another guy who, while we're talking about people like this, who respected the media, was Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Okay, you remember
Yeah, Ted Kennedy. Yeah, sure.
He's talking. He comes out. He had made a big speech in the big ballroom, and he comes out and he's talking to everybody. Thank you. And he says, uh, the TV people are yelling questions at him. He says, "Hold on a second, will you please?" He said, "I want to talk to my radio folks over here." And he took me, Len Bean, and a couple others, and he takes us over in a corner. He says, "Shoot." And we asked our questions, and he answered our questions, shook all of our hands, thanked us for being there. And then he said, "Now I got to deal with the TV people." And then he walks away. I mean, these are moments
Yeah.
that stick in my head. I remember that. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing the huge difference. And so bringing up that Cellucci story and then my experience with Mitt Romney, and I don't know if that it's really interesting to know if people in general see that difference, because for me that means the world, because I look at that, and if you're comfortable enough, that shows a level of honesty. Now, do politicians lie? Yeah, of course they do. Are they dishonest? Yes. They're a politician. But when you have that level of comfort where it's like Ted Kennedy says, "All right, guys, shoot. Here I am." Or you got Paul Cellucci with his mouth full and crumbs everywhere. Or if you say, "Hey, come into my office. We're just going to do an open press conference once a week," or something like that. That is a level that, and unfortunately, I think people's expectations have become so low that they don't think that that's what elected officials should do. That's exactly what they should do.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed Governor Romney exactly twice on the phone, never in person. He gave one of his speeches at the Holiday Inn in the big ballroom, and then he came out and he talked only to the television people. Us radio people were off to the side looking at each other saying, "When are we going to get a chance?" So this went on for 20, 25 minutes. He's asking questions and he's smiling at the camera and doing this. "When are we going to get our chance?" We never did. He simply said, "That's okay. We're done here. Thank you for all attending." He was very nice. Gone. On the talk show, um, he went on the phone. He was very pleasant. He answered all my questions. Called me Larry. Probably had it written down in front of him. "This is the guy I'm talking to." It's so bad. I wanted to say at the end of the show, "By the way, my name's Pete," just to see what he would do. But he was good to talk with. But he was, and another thing about watching Mitt Romney, and he did something like this twice in the ballroom. Both times he gave these long speeches, half-hour speeches. So not one note, not one 3x5 card with a little hint of what he said. Nothing. I got to give him that much.
He had it down.
He would look out at the audience, right to left, straight ahead, say what he had to say. Never a note in front of him.
He had
It was
it down.
amazing to watch.
Yeah, he is. I think, as far as like the prototypical like politician with their no teleprompter. So
Yeah, Ted Kennedy was the same way. He could talk for an hour and a half and never look down.
Yeah. No, it's hey, when you do the stump speech enough, it's so buried into your soul that that's how it goes. But I can tell you that it does make a difference. I think that level of just accessibility. I mean, I wouldn't even understand why someone would want to be an elected official if they didn't have that comfort level. It's just really, it's interesting. And so that's kind of how you were asking me about some of the people who great interviews at Good Morning Pittsfield. I mean, you can tell, what I'm saying? You get that connection, and you know who and it's not just about, who sounds good or someone who you have a rapport with, but I think in those conversations are the ones where you really get to a different level. You're not just dealing with talking points, because, I mean, Mitt Romney was kind, but I'm sure he never dipped below talking points. You know what I'm saying? He never got any deeper than that.
Well, his office did ask me for an advance list of questions. And I said, I don't want to give an advanced list of questions. And they said, well, if you don't give an advanced list of questions, we don't know if the governor will be able to come on the air with you. Okay, well, I had to, kind of toss it up as you do. I want the governor on the air. So I gave him a list of questions with the little exclamation point. I might throw something else in there, like a question for an answer. He gives me an answer and says, the sky is blue. Why is it blue, Governor? Come up with that kind of stuff. But we didn't do that very much. Once in a while, I would throw something like that in. But he was, to the point. It was amazing.
It is. Well, he's a pro. He's a pro.
Well, you're on both. You have been on both sides.
I've been on both sides of
yeah.
it. Yeah.
See, I've only been on the side where I'm asking questions.
Yeah.
Not on the side where I get it. Well, no, where I'm answering.
Well, and I've always loved reporters because I was one. So it's
you're the only underpaid reporter.
I always appreciated it because I knew the perspective. So I felt like that was always helpful, but I can tell you that it is rare now to see that level of accessibility. It just is, and I don't know why. Like why do you do this?
When I was on WBEZ on the talk show, it wouldn't be unusual to have city councilors on, the mayor on, DPW people on. I'd have state people on. I'd be talking about a lot of different things. But one thing was really cool was that whenever I called the mayor's office, Mayor Doyle, for instance,
there's one right there.
He was one who used to come on the show quite a bit.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember one time he called me up in reception. Larry, Mayor Doyle is on the phone. Really? Okay. Well, there's nothing going. I'm thinking quick. 700 things go through. What's going on in Pittsfield? All right. I pick it up. Hello.
Or you're like, what'd I do?
Yeah.
Well, no, just real quickly. So when I was in North Adams, whenever Mayor Barrett called, you're like, oh shit, what'd I do? You know what I'm saying? Like that was
what I do. Did I get somebody mad at me? But and he called me up one time and said, hey, you got an opening on your show? And I said, yeah. I said, Friday's open. I said, I was going to play a repeat. He says, can I come on? Sure. What do you want to talk about? Stuff. Okay. And that's the way he was. It worked out really good. Jim Roberto was the same way.
Sure.
As mayor. He would call up, say, you got any openings or if there's something going on, Larry, I have something to tell you. Can I give you a statement? He was like that.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to work with government people, the city council.
And so, and I worked for Jimmy. So what I tried to achieve there was that authenticity, because I knew that like I didn't want to be that PR person who was like the screen. And I got a really interesting. So a lot of times PR people, that's how and it's incorrect. The job of the public relations person isn't to be the screen and to block accessibility. What you want to do is kind of create a bridge and create that rapport so that the elected official is able to have a good rapport with the reporters and be able to get the message across.
Have you ever done television?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever had a time in television that was the worst of your life? I mean, how do you do this? Okay. Now, I remember I'm on Pittsfield Community Television. I have a show called Kratka's Corner, and it went on for quite a few years. And the cable system in Great Barrington, the Southern Berkshire District, they were having a telethon. So they would, because I'm heard now on radio all over the county, and they invited me down to be on their telethon. Oh, it's raising money. Sure. I'm happy to help. So on a Sunday afternoon, great. Sign me up. So now go down there. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to go on camera and I've got a tie on and a suit and the whole thing, and I'm going to go on camera and I'm going to pitch for whatever they're doing, and maybe it's keeping the station on the air or something. So I go down, and the producer of the show, who was a salesman at WBEC, who I did not get along with, he said, "I'm going to hook you up with a co-host." I said, "Oh, great. Who?" "Roger the Mime." Now, you know what a mime is, folks? They tell a story like, you're going to go up the hill, or they don't talk. Everything is with the hands and the whole body movement. They teamed me up with Roger, the mime, on it. Teamed me up with the guy. I'm talking, and he's doing all these things with the hands. And finally, I said, "Roger, what the hell are you doing?" you know. And he answered with his hands. I don't know what he said. And so we finished our segment, which was about 20, 25 minutes long. It was like the end of the world was coming. I couldn't wait to stop this. And when I introduced, okay, we're going to go over to Carolyn, such and such. I went over. I said, "I am not doing this again." And Roger said, "You know what?" And he did talk, of course. And he said, "You know something? That was the funniest bit I ever had a chance to do." I said, "What? You were absolutely struggling. You don't know how bad I wanted to answer your question and talk with you, but I couldn't." And he said, that's my thing. I do everything with my hands. I talk with my hands. I body movement." He said, "But inside I was wetting my pants." He said, "I couldn't wait." And I did. After I talked to the guy, we had a soda together, and we went back on, and he did the same thing, but I was a little used to him. But I went up to the producer afterward, and I said, "Don't ever do that again." But working with
I gotta get a video of that.
I mean,
I gotta see that.
try to picture. It'd be like you asking me, where you're interviewing, and I've got a camera on me over here. And I
Yeah.
go, "Ask me a question, Jack." Go ahead.
Yeah.
Ask me a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Ask me a question.
Is the sky blue?
That's what he was doing the whole time. "Well, over here for auction, we have this wonderful crock pot," and he's going, he's making a crock pot with his hands. It was, and when I think about it, it was one of the funniest bits ever. I had no idea. I couldn't wait to stop it. And then when we did the second hour, it went much better. As a matter of fact, I was laughing. He was doing something with his hands. I said, "Say that again." And he'd do it again. I said, "Say it again. You sure?" And he go, "Yeah." You can't say that on television." So we had, and then when we got off the air, uh, he said, "If we ever have to do this again," he said, "I will talk." And I said, "If we ever have to do this again, I'm going to try mime and see what you think." So it's one of those memories that's amazing.
You got into radio because you probably wanted to be a DJ.
Oh, you
I
can.
don't know. I mean, that's how I always felt. And maybe you said that to me at one point, but
Okay.
that's my
Here
that's
I
my
am.
that's my
Here I am, a 13-year-old with pimples. Okay, I'm in seventh grade, and you can hear them popping. And my grandmother's in the hospital. Now, I've up until this point, I liked listening to radio. I would what we call DX on the AM side, listening to distant stations at night. My father used to say, "Turn the radio off, go to sleep." You're okay, Dad. Okay. And so here I like hearing what the guys are doing and have my favorite radio stations. This is in Central Connecticut. So I'm a 13-year-old kid. My grandmother's in the hospital. My father says, "The thing, you have to go and see your grandmother." No, in a hospital? I'm not going to no hospital. You're going to go see your grandmother, and that's it. Okay. I guess. And I moaned and groaned and everything. He goes, "And by the way," he said, "there's the woman in the next bed. Her husband is, he's a disc jockey on WHAY here in town." Well, let me tell you something. "He's a disc jockey?" "Yeah." "Oh, hey, I get to meet a disc jockey. Never met one before." So I asked my dad, "When's he in?" "I don't know." So I looked it up in the newspaper. That's the day they used to put who was on radio in the newspaper. you know, and it had his name. He was on from 3 to 7 o'clock at night. He was the program director as well. So okay, so I'll go. And I listened to the guy, and I've had this, everybody figures, what do you look like? You know, what do DJs look like? We all have great faces for radio. So anyway, I wonder, what's
Is
this?
that what I think now, because everything's on video now. So
Oh, yeah.
even radio people, podcast people, if you primarily do audio, there's always some sort of video component to
Oh,
it
yeah.
nowadays. So it's not like it used to be.
No.
Because back then, say when I grew up in the 70s or 80s or 90s even, you had no idea. And then when you actually saw that person, even locally, like if you saw someone who was on the radio and you saw him, and someone said, "Oh, that's the guy on the radio," and then you heard the person speaking, you're like, "That is
You're
not."
supposed to be tall. You're supposed to have more hair. Oh no, I thought you were bald headed or you were shorter. You're
Isn't that
5'1".
Isn't that funny how we
It's theater of the mind.
it
Yeah,
is.
that's what it is.
We
So
paint our mind with what we think this person should look like.
right. So I'm listening to this guy on radio for a few days before I go to the dreaded hospital to see my grandmother. And I go up to see my grandmother, and I go in and I said, "Hi, Grandma, how you doing?" "Fine." "Good. Where's the disc jockey?" And the guy's his wife is in the next bed. "Oh, he'll be here in a few minutes." So I talked to my grandmother, how are things going? Small talk. What does the 13-year-old ask you when your grandmother says, "What's new?" Baseball cards. So anyway, the guy comes in. He did not look anything like what I thought he looked like. I thought he was going to be 6'4". He was 5'3". He was a short little guy. He could just barely own property in some states. And here he comes up to see his wife. And, and then I talked, my father said, "Oh, here's my son. He likes radio." "Oh, you do you?" Come on. So he talks to his wife, and he talks to me. Finally, and he didn't talk to me all that much, but I am starstruck. This is a guy on the radio. And he says, "Well, why don't you call the station and come by? I'll show you the radio station." Well, that's like somebody saying, "Come on into Fort Knox, take whatever you want." "Not a problem." "Well, how many bars can you carry at the same time?" And I did. And I went up there and saw him, and we became friends. And he finally said, "How would you like to go on the air?" I'm blah, blah. So I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he hands me, now you know what this looks like. He hands me a yellow sheet of United Press International paper with the weather forecast on it.
Yeah.
Windsor locks, AP.
Yeah,
And I read the thing. He says, "Well, go in the other room." And they had another studio. He said, "Go in there, and when I cue you, read the weather." I said, "Okay." So I go in there. Oh, geez, no. And this is really something. I go in, I sit down, and he looks at me, and the commercials are over. And he says, "Well, we have a young man with us here tonight. Going to read the weather forecast for us. Larry, go ahead." He cues me. Dead silence.
you froze.
I froze. And I'm sitting there looking. He said, "Oh, it's right in front of you, Larry." He says, "Right there." "Oh, partly sunny today." He said, "It's dark out. Partly cloudy tonight." And I read the thing, and I got through it. Seemed like an hour and a half. It was about 30 seconds. And I get through that, and he goes, "Thank you, Larry. You're a budding announcer." He says, "Thank you very much." And he gets to the next record. So I leave the thing, and I come back in. He said, "You're scared out of your mind, weren't you?" I said, "Terrified." He says, You'll be okay." I said, "I want to do this someday." He said, you might." He said, "But I'll tell you something." He said, "If I were you, I'd go to college and become a teacher or something." He said, "You'll make more money." But we stayed friends, and he left the station and went into some real estate something. And then I lost track of him when I moved away from home. But guy's name was Ray Lawrence. And I never forgot that. I froze right there. Felt like,
Well,
and my what's worse is that my father was listening. He was listening to the radio just in case. just in case. I said, well, in case, well, maybe he lets you introduce a record or something. Uh-huh. You had me read the weather, Dad. Yeah, you really were bad. I said, I was bad. He said,
sad.
well, yeah, you kept saying it was nighttime. You read the daytime stuff. I said, yeah, well, I was a little nervous. A little?
Man.
Come on. So, I mean, it's these little things. And I remember talking to the students at Taconic High School one time because we were sitting around having a meeting. And one of the kids said, all right, how long have you been in radio? And so, how many centuries you got? You know, since when? And that was 1961.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
That was
Wow.
1960. Yeah. That's like before Kennedy. And I mean, it was a lot of fun. And then of course went to school and all that, I got on the air. But someday we'll have to talk. It'll take a whole afternoon, but we'll talk about the stations I was at. I could tell you about all the stations. The owners,
how many stations were there?
The owners for something.
How many stations were there?
Oh, I don't know. How many?
Yeah.
How many hands you got? No, there were quite a few because the object when I got into broadcasting, actually I was first a jock, 1967 during the winter of 66 into 67. I even remember the first song I played. Here Comes My Baby by the Tremolos on WBRL in Berlin, New Hampshire. A 250-watt little crappy radio station. Didn't get outside of the city limits. And it was like I was working weekends, Friday and Saturday nights. It was like the most beautiful job in the whole world. I got paid very little. I didn't care. I stayed with my roommate, lived in Berlin, New Hampshire. So I stayed at his folks. We came up for the weekend and, we did that. But yeah.
There it is.
And I've been babbling since then. Even I'm talking now. So.
It is. But I think, that love is what makes community radio in Pittsfield exist.
Hey, right. And there's a lot of people, excuse me, on.
But I mean, specifically your love, because if you didn't do what you did, that station would be gone.
That's what I'm told.
It would have been gone.
Yeah. And then in 2014, I decided to retire, period. And I said, that's it. It was running good, and I did that. And then, of course, the rest is history. PCTV. In fact, I remember talking to Sean Sear, and I said, wouldn't be a bad idea if you guys could take it over. Bet you could run a heck of a radio station. And he goes, well, will you help? I said, if you want me to, sure. I didn't help that much as they took over because they did an incredible job.
Yeah.
Every time I go down there for something, I look at the studios they built, and I'm blown away by how professional they are. They're the best studios in town. I haven't been at WUPE lately, but they're the best studios around, and the place just sounds so good, So I'm very proud of what Sean Sear and
he's a pro. Well, when we had the idea of and I think that brought so much more exposure to WTBR is bringing cameras in the studio. So when I had that idea and, I'm like, hey, it's wired up at the high school. Like, no big deal. Here I'm saying no big deal.
No big deal. No, Sean had to run video cable from halfway across the school. And he did all this through the fake ceilings they had. And he would start in one room and I'd see him coming across. And finally he got it into the studio and he dropped it down by the control board. And he said, we're going to go on television. Oh, this ought to be interesting. And they brought some old cameras in. Remember those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were like old security cameras or something like that.
Yeah. But it was an amazing idea. All of a sudden, instead of just being on the radio, the guy here on the radio, now they can see what you look like.
Yeah. It's double the exposure. And I think that really did help because there were a lot of people who did not listen in the morning, but they said that they were going to bed at night and they would see the show.
Of course, it was on endless reruns.
Yeah. And, but specifically, I think it was like 11 at night or 10:30, or I think it was 11. And so people would check it out. That brought, that double exposure. And that was when I would say even the access television, PCTV, was watched to a greater extent because the stations were actually on the main level there, 16, 17, 18. They were right there. You didn't have to go searching in the thousands to find the station. And so it was really helpful.
Yeah. It was, when I first found out they were going to do that, I said, huh? And I said, now, how are you going to do this? And they said, we're giving John a little switch.
Mm.
And actually, folks, he was switching cameras with his left hand.
Yeah.
I think it was your left hand.
It's still
Click,
on.
camera one,
Right
camera two, camera three, camera one. You had three cameras.
Yeah.
And actually it looked pretty darn good.
It was great.
Yeah.
And when they brought in the nicer cameras, because they knew, okay, now it's go time. Now we can bring in these and I think they had replaced cameras that enabled them to get a higher quality in there. It was awesome. It was awesome. So I think, having everything from live performances. We would try every Wednesday morning and I don't know how I thought that we were going to every Wednesday morning have a musician appear at 7:30 in the morning, but we tried like hell, but we had a lot of great performances in that, and they sounded good.
You did, and we had a little audio control board to the right of, well, you couldn't touch it, but we sometimes you would set it up, and you had some pretty darn good people on there.
Oh yeah,
you had people playing guitars, trombones, and you had cheerleaders, and I was like, holy cow!
We had the chorus come in quite a bit.
Singing.
I remember, it was Jack Waldheim would come in quite a bit as a performer. Tony Lee Thomas, I think, may have come in. Mary Birdie, a lot of them made the rounds, and they made the trip. Andy Kelly, we did the Christmas Spectacular every year. And we do, people would get up early in the morning and have their vocal cords ready. It was good stuff. It's good stuff. I think, and so it's a wonderful legacy. And now you still, you haven't stopped because you have your show. That's 60 plus stations out there?
60 something.
60 something.
Yeah, 64, 65.
What's the show again?
Nothing But Old 45s is what it's called. There are actually several different versions of the show.
And so do you record that live or do you post that in?
Studio.
Yeah.
And so I put it together. And the original version plays 60s and 70s, the Beatles and stuff like that. And maybe a few late 50s. Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, stuff like that. Then there's the Nothing But Old 45s, The Next Generation. And no link to Star Trek, by the way. Just The Next Generation. And this plays the 70s and 80s. And that was 52 shows that I did, but I decided to expand it to 102. And I'm around number 80 right now.
Wow.
So it's growing. Then there's the classic rock shows. And by the way, Next Generation is on Mondays. This is a shameless plug now. Mondays at 10 a.m. on WTBR, and Classic Rock is at 11 a.m. on TBR.
Nice.
Now, if you thought that was something, I got a phone call several years ago from a fella at a country station. He goes, do you do any classic country? I go, no. I don't do any classic country. Have you ever been a country jock? Oh, yeah. I was a country jock at different places. Sure. Yeah. It was fun. Well, do you play Johnny Cash and things like that? Yeah, I used to play that. Sure. He said, well, if you ever do a classic country show, I'd like to hear it. Well, a year and a half later, I called the guy up. I said, you want classic country? I got something called Sweet Country Music. And he took the show that he's in a place called Seagoville, Texas. And not a big station, but and he's playing sweet country music. And so are a whole bunch of radio stations all over the country.
Nice.
Yeah, including, can I do a shameless plug? WNAW, now WNAW 1270, North Adams, your old stopping grounds.
Yeah.
Okay. They are now New Country. But
no kidding.
Yes, but see, he didn't even know that. And they're also 94.7 or something like that. But the program director, they call them branding directors now. Brand. And he got a hold of me and he says, hey, you have a country show, don't you? I said, yeah, it's Sweet Country Music. He said, well, he was in Bennington, Vermont. He heard it. And he wanted to know if he could run it on NAW. I said, well, you're new country. Why would you want to run?
And you said,
Yeah.
how much are you going to pay me? Is that what you said?
Well, I told him I work for T-shirts and coffee mugs. Well, I can't sell the show because it's all copyrighted. Anyway, he said no. He said they had some of the older listeners complained that why don't you play some classic country?
Yeah.
And so he thought of me and my show, and you're right in my backyard. Hi, how are you? You used to work here anyway, so what do you think? So we talked about it, and I sent him a demo, and he must have run it by the powers that be, and they said sure. So Sweet Country Music is run from 7 to 9 a.m. Sunday mornings on WNAW.
WNAW.
WNAW Country.
Some
New country.
wonderful memories there. That and really WNAW was the basis, my basis for Good Morning Pittsfield, because we had the opinion program. And now that was a half hour every morning call-in show. Probably nothing unique about it other than the fact that it was the show of record in northern Berkshire County. It was the opinion program, so Ron Plock had hosted it for many, many years, and then I took the reins for a few years, and so that was really the basis.
You had great little studios up there.
It's great.
I remember,
a lot of space.
when it finally got down to the Berkshire News Network being me, I was it.
I am the Berkshire News Network.
WNAW, they wanted to do debates for the election. Yep. And they asked, I had a mayoral debate that
back when radio stations did debates.
They did debates.
Can you imagine?
But I did a debate, and I didn't do a debate with John Barrett. But I did other debates up there in that little studio. And I remember sitting in that little tiny studio with all these microphones around, and to me it was like this is great. This is old fashioned.
It was really a great studio.
Yeah. And
it was
the
so
guy in the next room running the control board. And
it was literally, I mean, you had a studio, you had the big window, so you could see the guy running the board, and you had your guests and taking phone calls. It was an awesome setup. And we actually, and we would go in there on every Saturday morning and do this thing called the Trading Post, which also was hugely popular. But the thing I love about that is just it was literally set up for broadcasting. Yeah. This wasn't a building that was like makeshift or anything, and it's still there. They sold it apparently, which is very sad. But I can tell you that like if I was to build a radio station, it would look like that. It would look like that.
Well, I remember going in there. If you remember, John, the newsroom was stocked with computers.
Yeah.
There were teletypes banging away, and you could look into the next room. And I remember going in there for some reason. I was working at WBEC, and I don't know why, but I think they sent me up to get a commercial. It was a tape. Had to get it. Could you go up to NAW and get sure? And you had to go by the receptionist. You had to stand muster and salute and the whole thing. And I went in and I said, I'm here to pick up a commercial. Oh, fine. For WBC. Okay, fine. So she gets up and goes around. Meanwhile, I'm walking around. Oh, look at it. Here's a door. I walk in there. The door's open. There's 2-3 guys in the newsroom. I don't remember if you were one of them, but they were in there, and the teletype is oh, this is really fun. Wow, look at this. And I'm looking around. And she comes out with a tape. Here you go, sir. Thank you. And I left. And of course, years later, I went back, and it was just a relic of itself.
Yeah.
But that was.
But the last time I went in there was still a copy and a folder that said public records law that I had put up there. So, not a lot, it was kind of like, it was almost like walking into a time capsule. So it pretty much looked exactly the same, but unfortunately, they did sell it because, that's the way it's been going in commercial radio. And, but there's a guy named Dave Fierro.
Oh,
and you talk about advice from, your mentor.
Dave has been in radio since it was invented.
Yeah, he was.
I'm convinced of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for me, but if you know Dave, he's really gruff.
Yeah.
He's to the point, and he's not going to do much small talk.
No.
And if he doesn't want you in the studio, he'll tell you to get out. That's Dave. So, my very first day at WNAW, I remember asking him. I said, "Well, Dave, he's got a lot of experience. Everybody knows his voice. He's a pro. He can go in there and soundtrack, and he's done in a heartbeat. He knows his stuff. He can get it done." So I asked him. I said, "Well, what does it take to be really great in radio?" And, and so he says these words: "Can you read?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You'll be fine."
Yeah. Well, when I was
guys, it's not that complicated sometimes.
When I was going to school in Boston, Graham Junior College, and I'm going, and I don't want a part-time job, get some extra spending money. So just for the fun of it, I went to a phone booth and I opened up the Boston Yellow Pages to radio stations. And I'm looking down, okay, WBZ, I know that one. WHCH, I'm looking for stations I saw. WBOS, Commonwealth Avenue. Oh, that's where my dorm is. So I called and I said, "Hi, I'm a student over here, blah blah blah, and I was wondering if you need any part-time jocks." And the woman said, "Hold on." And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. This guy picks up, and you remember Dave Fierro's voice, mellow, deep. This guy had a voice that made Fierro sound like a soprano. And he gets on the phone. He goes, "Yes." And I told him what I want. He goes, "Well, we could, why don't you come up here and I'll audition you." Holy cow. So I looked up the address and it's 3 blocks down on Com Ave in the Hotel Somerset. It's not there anymore, of course, but 7th floor. Went down to the Hotel Somerset. Okay. Go up to the 7th floor, walk in. "Hi, I'm here to do an audition to talk to Norm." "Oh, Norm." Exactly. The girl gets it. "Norm, kid here to see you." She says, "Okay, go down the hall, third door on the left." So I go down the hall, third door on the left. It's amazing studio. 2 gigantic old turntables from the 1940s and these big microphones. Here's this guy sitting there chain smoking. And I said, "Hi, I'm Larry." And he turns around, stands up, he shakes my hand, and with the deepest voice on earth, he says, "Welcome to WBOS." He said, I was talking about this, part-time. "Yes, I need somebody for Sunday mornings." "Really?" "Yeah. It's running the board for the ethnic programs." "Sure, I can do that." And he said, "Okay, I'm going to give you an audition." He gives me just a piece of news. He takes it out of the trash. He said, "Go over there and sit over there at that mic and I'll record you." And he puts a tape in the machine and he lets it roll. And he says, "Accuse me." He says, "Go." So I read the AP stories, whatever they were at the time. And he says, "Okay, one more thing. Give our call sign." I said, "This is WBOS Boston." He said, 1600. 1600 WBOS Boston. Okay. And I walk over and he goes, "Okay, I could use you on Sunday morning. Can you start this weekend?" "Sure." "Oh, yeah. What do I have to do?" "It's all you got to do is cue the talent and he's play their records and say WBOS Boston every hour."
And that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
So I got the job. But before I got the job, he said, "Okay, kid, I'm going to ask you, what's the most important thing in radio and broadcasting?" And I said, "Well, the microphone, the studio." "What's the most important thing in broadcasting?" "Well, the control board." "Nope." "What's the most important thing in broadcasting?" Think about it for a second. I said, "Well, the transmitter, because without a transmitter, nobody's going to hear you." "Nope. I'll tell you what it is. You got to empty the trash every now and then." And he points toward the trash like that one over there. And he says, "You take it down the hall and dump it in. I'll pick up the basket later." He said, "Welcome aboard." And that was it. I got my first job in radio, WBOS Boston.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I used to have to play. I'd be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and do the Italian hour, which is an hour and a half. And then I had the Camelakis radio hour, which was actually a half hour. And then I had various different ethnic shows. I had the Albanian hour, which was 15 minutes, but they called it the Albanian hour because it used to be an hour, but they changed it. And the bishop came in, the Albanian bishop for Greater Boston. He comes in and he sits there and he has his hood on, and I would play this music, and then he would cue me. I would play the music, and then I'd cue him, and he would pray in Albanian for 15 minutes. And then he would reach up with his right hand and cue me, and I'd start the music again. And by now it's coming up to 9:30, and we'd kind of fade out. And he'd get up, put his hood on, and walk out. And he had Bibles or something, and he would walk out the studio door. That was it. Never a goodbye, a hello, thank you, nothing. Oh, I could tell you about that. Someday I should write a book about these things because
you should. Let's do it. Let's write a book. Well, Larry, man, it's good catching up with you.
Yeah, no, we got to do this again sometime. I have endless stories which you'll be bored with. Okay.
I love it. There's nothing like radio. Yeah. There's nothing like radio, and I think there's always going to be a place for it.
Yeah.
Because what else are you gonna listen to in your car?
Yeah. Talk to my granddaughters. They stream in the car.
Oh, sure they do. Oh, yeah. But but at the same time, there's something about the immediacy.
Yeah, I remember saying, you ought to tune into WNAW or WTBR and listen to your grandfather. Huh? You're on what? Radio. Radio? Dad, do we have radio in the car? They ask my son. He goes, yeah, we got one. But it's a lot of fun. And if you ever want to spend another hour and a half with boring talk, give me a call.
Let's do it. Larry Kratka. Hey, my man. We'll be seeing you soon, and thanks for all your help for everything. We got some new mics in here, so we're kicking it.
Happy to be here. I thank you for asking.
All right, my man. I'll talk to you soon.